hosting the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky has been involved in two of those now. They have won both of them, the 106-100 win over Florida at home on the opening Saturday of SEC play, and now a 95-90 victory over Mississippi State on Saturday night in Starkville. So let's start with the good. And I think one of the good things, hey, Dad, was what looked and sounded on television like a phenomenal crowd at Humphrey Coliseum.
You would be, you would be accurate in that assessment. Big crowd, very excited, students packed to the absolute rafters. Most of not a lot of empty seats, if any, around the stadium, and not a lot of you think, okay, well maybe Kentucky brought a large contingent. Not really. There were some Kentucky fans in there, but I wouldn't say there was any like big blue group at any point there. So. Good crowd, good atmosphere. They were certainly into the game. Mississippi State gave them a reason to stay in the game and to stay involved. Led early, had the good comeback late, had the lead with just, I think, 8 minutes to go, and you just couldn't hold on there. It's the story of playing Kentucky the last basically 2 decades for Mississippi State. In the game, had some opportunities.
20 of 21, is that right? Or 19 of 20?
They've won 19 of 20, yes, in the regular season. And it's 19 straight in the regular season. So, yeah, it's just they just did not make the plays to win when winning time presented itself. That's how you have to look at it.
I thought at the very end that it looked like, and in fairness, I was not able to watch the entire game uninterrupted. I watched most of the game all the way through, but it was kind of looking, and I was trying to eat at the same time and whatever else. So I did think it looked like Mississippi State pressed a little at the end. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes, like on a Josh Hubbard shot, sometimes it's going to look like it's pressing when it's really a pretty good shot for him because of the ability, because of like if we're talking about a quarterback changing arm angles or being able to throw on the run to the left or right. Sometimes we talk about, being off plane but still being able to deliver. I feel like Josh Hubbard's a guy that can kind of be off plane and still take a good shot, where there are a lot of guys you look at them, you're like, what are you doing? That's like off balance going to your right. But he's proven those are shots that he can make. And even so, I thought Mississippi State pressed a little bit when they just needed one bucket at the end.
And Jan's talked about that, and they did it a lot in the first half as well. That's how Keyshawn Murphy takes 2 threes. That's how Michael Nwoko takes a 3-pointer. It's just one of those things where you feel like you're open, and it's Kentucky, and we need this bucket, so I'm going to try. And you're better off just running your offense and trying to get your post guys back into that position.
Yeah.
And you're right with Hubbard too as well. Pressed a little bit, didn't play. Most of the second half with that 4th foul. And that's when State was able to come back, was with him on the bench, which I was very surprised by. And he comes back in, and it just wasn't his night, and he's such a good player that when he does have a down night, we're surprised by it. Kentucky did a good job of being physical with him, not giving him a lot of open looks, and he tried some contested shots that maybe he would have been better off trying to find another guy. That's one issue with State right now is, with Kanye Clary hurt and then with Riley Kugel getting hurt in this game, you're forcing Hubbard to play a lot of point guard, and he's not a point guard. He is a shooting guard. He is a 2. And so, the burden of trying to run the offense through him while he's trying to run the offense it may be a little bit too much for him. State could desperately use Kanye Clary getting back. Don't know if that's going to happen or not. And then, like I said, the loss of Kugel, who, if you watch the game, it was pretty evident you were going to get good Kugel. Like, he looked sharp in the first few minutes that he got to play. Then he falls on his hand. He's out for the rest of the first half. He tries to come back. He comes in and buries a 3-pointer in the second half. You're like, okay, back in. And then he tweaks his ankle and has to come out for the rest of the game. That was a big loss for Mississippi State. They definitely could have used him in this game.
Borky, if I said right now I have a vote for SEC Defensive Player of the Year, would you be mad at me for giving it to Cam Matthews?
No, I texted Haydad during the game that Cam Matthews is maroon Herb Jones. I mean, he has a very similar game. And
Herb Jones won SEC Defensive Player of the Year, didn't he?
He did.
At Alabama.
And now he's an elite level, although out for the season, of course, elite level NBA defender who's developed a three-point shot. But that's kind of what his game reminds me of. He does all the ugly stuff, and I mean that complimentary. I mean, chasing down offensive rebounds, even little things like after a miss, like just coming up behind a guy and slapping the ball out of his hand. Just instead of just jogging backcourt into play defense, like even after the opponent Kentucky got a rebound the other night, he just slaps the ball out of the guy's hand and State gets another possession because of it. Those kind of plays that he makes. I mean, he's just a bully. But what I really liked about his game and what I thought was unfortunate there at the end for State is they were able to break down Kentucky a lot. And, drive and kicks leading to open threes, and he was part of it. In those last few possessions, they didn't have that. Going back to what you guys were talking about a second ago, ill-advised early shots, guarded threes instead of breaking Kentucky down to get a cleaner look, because in the second half, starting with Matthews of all people, they were able to do that thing and instead kind of rushed some contested three-point shots.
Now, some of that was because of the pressure that Kentucky's offense put on Mississippi State. And when another team is absolutely shooting the lights out of the gym, sometimes it makes you feel like you got to do a little bit more. Mississippi State scored 90 points in the game. The second half was dead even at 46 apiece. And like Haydad said, that was with Josh Hubbard on the bench for a lot of that second half. Kentucky shoots 56% from the field, and they shoot 50% from behind the arc. Now, we're not talking going 3 of 6 from 3 or 7 of 14,
right,
or even 12 of 12. We're talking 16 of 32 from behind the arc, and that included like 3 or 4 late misses from 3 for Kentucky.
Yeah. And Jackson Robinson, a guy who's shooting 29% from three-point range, shoots 7 of 10 in this game. Just had a monster game for the Wildcats. That was a big part of the reason they won. He hit a ton of big shots. State was 12 of 40 from 3, but as I mentioned, Nwoko and Murphy, your two centers, combining 0 for 3. 12 of 37 just looks better. But State
well, 30% is not good enough, especially
it's not good
volume.
Enough. Yeah, at 12 of 37, now you're at 33%. But even then, I mean, you can't, 50% three-point shooting. Kentucky played out of their mind offensively. They played really, really well. And State just didn't have enough answers for them at the end. Borky, going back to what you were saying about Cam Matthews doing the little things, the little things for him are not getting steals and blocking shots. He did the little things in this game. He hit 2 threes. He was, I think, perfect from the free throw line. That's the little things for Cam Matthews. That's the things that if he can add those to his game, he becomes one of the best players in college basketball. Because the defense and the passing and the rebounding are going to be there. It's can he add a little bit more scoring? And that's what he did in this game. He had 19 and 10.
Yeah. For the season, State shooting just below 34% from behind the arc. You're like, well, 30%, 34%, that's not that much different. Yeah, that's a basket and a half. And a basket and a half in this scenario makes a difference. Kentucky,
it's the game.
Kentucky for the season is shooting 37%. They shoot 50% from behind the arc in this one. The 30% number that State shot from 3, to put that in perspective, Texas A&M is the worst three-point shooting team in the SEC, and they're at 30.9% for the year. So it was not a great – yes, you made a bunch of them when you hit 12 triples, but that's not a percentage that you can make work. I mean, especially when you're talking about that kind of volume. All 5 starters for Mississippi State in double figures. R.J. Melendez had 14. Matthews had a double-double with 19 and 10. Nwoko was in double figures with 10 points. Better performance for him.
And battled foul trouble there, too, so he could have been better off, yeah.
Claudell Harris has another solid game. 13 points for him, 15 for Josh Hubbard as well. So it was a really entertaining basketball game. I know it was a gut punch if you're a Mississippi State fan to be right there in it at the end and just not to be able to finish. I saw some people said, okay, it's basically the exact same Mississippi State Kentucky game we've watched every year for the last 10 years. You had that incredible one last year where, what was it, Reed Humphreys that hit the shot at the end for Kentucky.
Reed Shepherd.
Who's Reed Humphreys?
He played baseball here.
Well, he might have made a shot. I don't know.
He might have. Good athlete.
But yeah, Reed Shepherd's the guy that I was talking about. Let's grab a couple of messages because I thought a couple of these were pretty good. I'd like to see more out of our starting guards. 1 assist, 2 turnovers, 2 rebounds from the starting guards in the game. I guess you're talking about what
Hubbard and Harris there.
Hubbard and Harris.
Yeah. And that goes back to what I was talking about a minute ago. You just don't have a true point guard out there. Your point guard is Cam Matthews right now. He's the guy who's running most of the offense.
Who had 3 assists and only turned it over twice to go around with 19 points and 10 rebounds.
Yeah. State didn't have a lot of assists in this game. And Jan's talked about that. In the first half, they only had 3 assists as a team.
13 of them on 32 made baskets.
Yeah, that is atypical for Mississippi State. They are a team that shares the basketball pretty well, but not so much today.
Even so, their assist-to-turnover ratio was better than 2-1. I mean,
it's
13
still good.
assists. They only turned it over 6 times in the ball game.
Yeah.
But, you look at the other side, though, and you got 2 Kentucky players with 6 or more assists. Lamont Butler had 8, and Amari Williams had 6 in the game. Let's see here. State had 80 points with 7:59 left and a lead. So you got to score more than 10 minutes or 10 points in the final 8 minutes of the game.
You do. And State just wasn't able to do that. Missed a lot of shots.
What do you think about this? Jans has to find better ways to get Hubbard clean looks. All his threes are off dribble handoffs, where last year they went under the screen. They're not doing that this year. He's got no space. And I know for a fact that is a scouting report emphasis for opposing teams.
Yeah.
When I did the game against Bethune-Cookman, and that's one of the things they were talking about in their scouting report. It's like, you cannot go under a screen.
Yeah. And this time last year, that wasn't the case so much. People didn't know. And I talked about that a little bit on the podcast. That is the burden of being the first name on the scouting report affecting Hubbard a little bit. This time a year ago, people were talking about Mississippi State. They were like, hey, you got to stop Tolu Smith. You got to stop them down low. They're going to get their points in the paint. And then, there's this Hubbard kid. Now it's stop Josh Hubbard at all costs, make other players beat you. And, it shows up sometimes. And he had the good game against South Carolina, but other than that, he just hasn't played well in the last, 5-6 games.
Yeah. Hey, Dad, in that situation, if you had to do it over again, do you put Hubbard back in the game, or do you keep the length and the hot hand of Melendez and Claudio Harris out there?
Well, I mean, you can keep those 2 guys in there and still have Hubbard out there. I mean, Hubbard, they're both in the starting lineup. I'm not, once I can get Hubbard back into the game, I'm not going to not have the guy who everybody agrees is the best player not on the floor. If he can play, he can play.
Do you anticipate Clary coming back this year?
There's a lot of smoke that he won't be, but I don't know for sure.
There's a lot here in this message. I'm not going to read it all. My friend told me Richard Cross is leaving to work at ESPN in New York.
You need to read the message.
I said I'm not going to read the entire thing. I said there was a lot there.
Okay.
If I'm going to work at ESPN in New York, it is news to me, and more importantly, it is news to my wife.
She'll love it in New York, though.
Only in short spurts.
I don't know, man.
I do.
We can't get Jane's Fifth Avenue?
I don't think we have any interest in living in New York.
Okay.
We all love the city.
Yeah.
For about 4 days at a time. Maybe 3. That's enough. And do you know how much money you got to have live in New York? A life that is like reasonably similar to the way most of us live in Mississippi.
More than we make now, probably. More than I make now. I don't know about you.
Got a friend with a 400 square foot apartment in New York, and they pay almost double what my mortgage is in rent.
Yeah, my niece lives in New York, and she lives in Brooklyn, and I laugh when I think about what I pay on my mortgage and what she's paying on rent.
Yeah, it's rough.
For like 2 rooms.
Seen Richard on TV Saturday, and he made me turn off my television. He is annoying.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Appreciate that.
And then on Monday, you turn the radio on to hear more Richard.
Yeah, like I needed to hear more
Probably
Richard.
assumed I wouldn't be working.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a fair assumption.
If that is a genuine criticism that you had to turn off your TV because you're annoying, like I'm honestly curious. What did I do or say that was so annoying to you?
Once again, overly biased towards LSU.
Yeah, you probably matched the energy on LSU good plays for Ole Miss good plays, and how dare you? Which
can we be real and say Kentucky made almost every 3 they threw up? That won't happen again.
That's a good point, too. State scored 90 points, didn't play its best game. Kentucky played maybe at the absolute peak of their offensive powers. And then defensively, I just don't know that Kentucky's great, right? 3 games in conference play, they've given up 100, 82, and 90. So they played a great offensive game, though. Like I said, 16 of 32 from 3. You'll beat the Warriors playing like that.
The only problem with that sentiment is they've already done it before. They hit 14 of 28 threes against Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same Florida team that held Tennessee to 43 points last Tuesday night. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Kentucky's just going to score a lot on a lot of people. I mean,
They're a
just
good offensive basketball team. They have a lot. You know what's funny about this, and we haven't mentioned it, is that as well as they shot, it wasn't Kobe Bray. He was 1 of 5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the guy that, we talk about Hubbard, the guy that I think would have been first on the sheet, like, hey, don't let this guy shoot. He shot poorly. It was other guys who picked up the pace for Kentucky.
It's almost like there's a reason Kentucky people wanted to move on from a coach that reached his ceiling a long time ago and was losing his edge, and upgraded at coach. And Arkansas decided to go after
Recapture the glory days?
that retread that was not succeeding at a place with more resources, and they expected something different for some reason.
Yeah, the jury's still out on Pope because, it's Kentucky, right? You got to win national championships to be a coach there. But the early returns look pretty good.
And he's a giant. Watching him down the
he
sideline.
played ball. He's 6'9", 6'10".
He blocks so much of the court from the camera angle because he's just, and especially when he's calling stuff, when his arms are up in the air.
He's got wingspan, to quote Jay Billis.
Go sit down, coach. I need to see.